Um, okay, so Jennifer, the next presentation is by Jennifer Wilson, and the title is Optimizing Your Virtual Education and Outreach Programs, which she has a lot of experience with. So,
Hey everyone, Jennifer Wilson here. I am the communications coordinator for the private well class program here at the Illinois State Water Survey. And I wanted to talk to you today about optimizing your virtual education and outreach programs. So now that we are on the other end of this major pivot to online and virtual programming, I want to have this conversation about evaluating and making plans for going forward. What went well, what didn't go as well, and how are we going to incorporate this into our programming in the future now that the landscape has changed so significantly. So there's three things that we're going to talk about today. First, I want to help you learn how to improve your loop closing when it comes to virtual programs. One of the biggest challenges I see is, and this goes for in-person programs too, is plan, deliver, and then move on to the next thing. It's really important to take that final step to evaluate and make changes based on that data. And there's even more data available when it comes to these virtual programs. Some of you may be comfortable with program evaluation, but you may not have yet applied it to this online virtual training landscape. So we'll help you connect the dots there. Number two, we're going to discover new best practices for webinars, podcasts, and social media. Those are all part of our program, and I'm going to share just a few high-level takeaways, some of the things that I think are overlooked the most often. We don't have time to dive into details as much, but I'm also looking forward to answering questions at the end, particularly in this area, because that's where I think you're going to have the most. And number three, I want to help you think about the ongoing role of online education and outreach in your program. For better or worse, people are more familiar with Zoom now. Online training has its perks in terms of cost efficiency, time efficiency, location, dealing with location challenges, and it's really here to stay. But I think we can make the best use of it by being really intentional about using it when it's the most helpful, when it's going to reach more remote audiences that you maybe wouldn't otherwise reach, and when we pick the topics that are most applicable to online programming. And we'll get to that. All right, so first, this idea of closing the loop. It's about making sure that when you're going through the full life cycle of a program, that you're taking those final steps to look at what happened, evaluate what went well, make a list of the things that didn't go well, and figure out specifically how you're going to fix those going forward. And then actually doing that and having the information lead into your next program. This data can come from evaluation forms that you distribute as part of your programs. It can come from personal anecdotes from your participants, from yourself, as well as your team, others that you work with. What are some observations you have, some gut feelings? And then you can even see if your more quantitative data supports that. You may have received some direct email feedback, email testimonials, praise for your programs, thank yous, things like that. That's an additional type of data that might be important. And then, of course, stats from the online platforms you're using. If you're hosting a webinar, there's going to be stats of number of people registered, number of attendees, how many questions were asked. You're going to have stats for your social media, the number of posts, the engagement, how many shares and likes they received. And if you're doing other types of content, videos, podcasts, multimedia, things like that, you're going to have numbers of views or downloads. So there's always numbers that you can bring in to this conversation with all of the more qualitative feedback that you might be getting on evaluation forms. So how do we actually go through this process? So the first step is to have a meeting. If you have a team, if you have colleagues who are working with you on this, have it with those individuals, even ones that maybe are not directly involved in the day-to-day, but are part of your broader team that can maybe help you see things that you may have overlooked, help connect the dots. Sometimes when we're so close to a program, we're so close to the information, we don't see things that others might see. And even if it's just you're the only one doing this type of thing, have a meeting with yourself, set aside that time to sit down, look at the data, and make a plan for going forward. So first, you're going to identify what worked well. One of the things that I see often is if something didn't go as well, or we think we're not good enough in the program, we try to reinvent the wheel and we ignore the things that did work well. So the things that are working for you, the things that maybe felt smooth, were engaging to the audience, you want to do more of those. You want to take note of what was effective and what was efficient for your program presentation, and do more of that and make sure you're continuing to do that. Don't scratch it just because something else needed to be improved. And that's the next step, is to think about what do you need to do more of? Do you need to do more marketing to get more attendees? Do you need to improve the content or the delivery of the content? Changing the format that you're working in, doing more of a flipped classroom type of thing where you're sharing information and then bringing people together to discuss it and ask questions. So there's always, and of course it depends on the type of program we're talking about, but when you have both of these perspectives, you can make sure that you're continuing to grow and build on what you're already doing well and making those small tweaks each time going forward. So then you'll decide what's going to change, what do you want to do, and then actually document that somewhere. I love to always be planning the next thing, and whenever I am taking feedback from a current project, I'm putting it in the folder or the Trello card or in a notebook. Wherever I am starting the planning for that next project, I'm listing the action items of things that I want to do differently. For example, for this conference, we had a Google Doc from last year with bullet points of here's all the things that we want to continue to do and the things that we want to change for this year so that we can make this event even better than last year. So making sure you're not losing track of those decisions and the takeaways is so important. Oftentimes we do these evaluation processes, we gather the feedback forms, we look at them and say, that's nice. And then you put it away somewhere and you don't ever take action on it. So that's the real part of closing the loop, is not just gathering and looking at the data, but then taking that action and improving your program because of it. And of course, I also want you to make sure you're building systems that you can use again and again. This is particularly important when someone else might be in your shoes some point in the future. I don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel, and I don't want you to have somebody else reinvent the wheel if you are called away to another project or move on to a different job opportunity yourself. So you should think about, how can this evaluation data be gathered automatically? Sometimes that's possible, but at least as a matter of routine. How do we make sure that closing the loop is part of project planning? How do we make sure that's just part of what we do, so that we're not feeling like we're constantly trying to figure it all out from scratch? And of course, this helps you leave breadcrumbs for others that may have to step into your shoes. And as I said, making sure that closing the loop is part of the plan from the very beginning will help you make sure that you're completing that whole cycle with each program, and you can continue to make your programs, whether they're virtual or in person, even stronger and more effective. All right, let's talk about some best practices. We're going to focus specifically on webinars, podcasts, and social media today, because that's some of the heart of what we do at Private Well Class, but I'm happy to answer additional questions about other types of formats as well. So first up, with webinars, this is something that's kind of our bread and butter. We do a webinar every single month, sometimes even 2 in a month, and we have quite a system for making sure that our team has everything under control, and these can be put on without a lot of reinvention each time. So the first thing I want you to think about is making sure you're using all this data we're collecting and understanding your audience so that you can choose even better topics. Now, I know some of you out there, you're kind of been told what to do, whether you put it in a grant or you have a funder or some sort of relationship, you're a contractor with a state agency, someone's telling you this is what you're training on, we understand that. But if you have some flexibility in the types of topics that you are creating programming around, whether it's an outreach activity or a particular training class, Understanding what it is that your audience really wants and needs to learn is one of the most important things in selecting webinar topics. If you've done some webinars, you pivoted to virtual programming already, you can look at that data and see, okay, which topics had the most attendance? Were there any other factors that influenced that? And, assuming everything was consistent, what language you use when describing the topics maybe gained more interest than others. So choosing the topics and of course naming them and communicating them effectively is really the first step. Similar to what we just talked about with your data system, creating a detailed reusable checklist for your webinar is one of the most important things that you need to do to make sure that webinars don't feel like this overwhelming, huge project every time. There's a lot of moving parts to planning, marketing, developing the content, delivering the content, creating an engaging experience, and then of course, closing the loop with your follow-ups and all of your evaluations. So the more that you can document all the different steps, the more that you can repeat that in the future and make webinars fit into your workday and your work rhythm and not feel like they're just something else on top. Because the more you have those systems in place, the more routine it will feel. This is more of a detail here, but one of the things that we have found the most important for delivering effective webinars, particularly when we're delivering the same topics again and again throughout the year, is to ask for questions from your participants in advance. There's a lot of logistical ways that you can handle this, but when you're asking for those questions, you can tailor your presentation to those questions. And maybe you have kind of a core set of material that you're teaching, but when you prepare answers to those questions, it makes every single event a little bit different and helps you as the program person develop more answers to a wider variety of questions. Another detail here is not to skimp on reminder emails. Sometimes when we're in a position of marketing our programs, we feel like we don't want to send too many emails. We don't want to bother people because we know how many emails we get every single day and how it can be really overwhelming. And it's because of those large number of emails why it's so important to send multiple reminders. A week before, 2 days before, a day before, an hour before, because there's a good chance that some of those emails are going to get buried in someone's inbox. So if you're having trouble with attendance, or maybe you have a fairly small percentage of registrants actually attending, making sure you're sending those reminder emails once they've registered, as well as reminder emails to maybe a broader email list to even remind them to register is so important. We get almost as many registrants in our final reminder to register email than we do in the whole entire period from launching the webinar to that final reminder email, because people react more in the moment. They know now whether or not they have time tomorrow to attend a webinar. You don't always know a month in the future if you're going to have that time and availability. So whether it's reminders to register or reminders to actually attend, don't skimp on that part and don't feel like you're being overwhelming, because it's really important. And then finally, I want to make sure that you're considering accessibility as part of your conversation. We are not experts and we're not perfect in this domain, but we do get professional transcripts made of all of our videos, including this conference, so that we can post those on YouTube with proper subtitle files. But there are also live transcription services, some that are AI-based and some that are human-based, but that technology is becoming more and more robust so that we can make live activities, online activities, even more accessible to those who are hard of hearing or have other disabilities. So last year we launched our podcast, Tap Talk. I've been podcasting for a number of years in another part of my life, and it was exciting to bring those skills to the table here with our podcast in the water industry, where we merge topics in this public health private well domain with what we do at wateroperator.org on public drinking water topics. And I think we've learned a lot in the process, and I know I've learned a lot over many years. And here are some of the top takeaways, the things that I want to make sure that you're doing if you decide that podcasts are right for you. And that's maybe even the important top line question here is podcasting is not right for everyone. It's not right for every topic. If you like talking, if you find it easy to have conversations, it might be something that's great for you. But there are a lot of steps. It requires editing. There's a lot of little moving parts, very similar to a webinar. And so you have to make sure you're prepared for that. So what I recommend is definitely being clear about your release schedule. And that might mean in the beginning to say, we're doing a limited series. We're doing a mini series. We're going to do this special program. It's going to have this many episodes. You can record them all at once and then release them over time, or release them all at once. If you want to promote binge listening of your audience. And when you do that, you'll have a better idea of what it takes to produce it before you commit to doing an ongoing weekly show. Because I knew what it takes to produce it. We've done seasons of 12 episodes at a time. So we're just finishing this week our second season with episode number 24, and this fall we will come out with our third season. And we knew that would work well for our rhythm. So if some podcasting is something that you're interested in, and once in a while I get emails asking about how we go about doing this, thinking about the schedule and even being really put some tight boundaries around it in the beginning will really help you get started and understand the process. Recording in batches is also a really big part of what we do. We try to schedule as many recordings in a single week as we can. Sometimes just because of schedules, it does spread out into more than 1 week, but it helps it from feeling like a hamster wheel that you're never able to stay caught up with. If you can set aside a particular zone of time just to record episodes, it works really well in terms of the whole production process, and allows you to gain that efficiency by doing things multiple times. So for example, we use a calendar where our guests can select available times and go ahead and book that time to join us for our recording. And when we can just set up 1 week of here's all the times we have available, it makes it so easy to just get those things on everyone's calendar, and we show up, we do the recording, we have our outlines all prepared, and then we can then edit those episodes and get them released. And that leads to my final tip, is making sure that you have an outline for your podcast conversation. Whether you're doing a solo show where you're teaching something, or you're having a conversation with a co-host or with a guest, having an outline makes sure that your information is organized and you have a flow through the episode. But it's also important that you don't have a script. People can tell when you're reading something, whether you're doing a podcast, you're doing a webinar, preparing a full script is not the natural way we speak. And it can be even more difficult to understand, and kind of takes away some of that value of what people really enjoy about podcasting, about just the more familiar, kind of more intimate connection with the host and with the speakers on the podcast when you're just reading something. So having an outline makes it really dynamic and interesting, and will make sure that your listeners continue to come back for more episodes. All right, social media. So I have a 2-part training, a 101 and 102 training on best practices in social media. So this is something that we could talk a lot about. And of course, there's so many different platforms today. And the one thing that I want you to think about is that it's better to be really present in one place than absent in multiple places. I was on a couple different websites today and in a variety of different arenas, and I noticed, at the bottom of their website or in the top, they said, here's all the 5 places we're on social media. And I went to check those accounts, and most of them hadn't been updated in at least 2 or 3 years. So I'd rather see you pick one place where you get good connection with your target audience, or even with other colleagues in your industry, depending on how you work and who you work with. I'd rather you be in that one place and be really effective in that one place than to just create an account and post a few times and then be absent in lots of different places. So it's so much more important, and you can gain a lot more effectiveness from it, and to show maybe your colleagues, your management, return on your investment if you do focus on that one domain, one channel. I also want to remind you that listening to your audience, that means following hashtags, seeing what others are saying in your area about your topic, whatever it is that you're dealing with, listening and then engaging with those people is far more important than the things that you post. Yes, you should post information about your training opportunities, helpful reminders, tips, important details about locations of, say, a free testing event, things like that. But the more that you can listen to the needs of your audience, engage, and be of service, the more you're going to be effective in social media, because you're going to know what people care about, what they're talking about, how can you better serve them. And that even feeds back into those webinar topics, that if you're really listening to what your audience has concerns and questions about, you'll be able to choose better topics and be a more effective overall in your virtual programming. And then finally, I want to remind you not to forget to add those important details that add context. You can't assume that your audience has maybe even ever seen anything else from you, or they know what you're all about, or they know what the Sunday extravaganza is, or whatever colloquial name that you have in your area about a particular event or thing. They may not have any idea what that is. So it's important to give more details than you think you need to, because that's going to help your audience better connect with the information, better follow through, be able to share it with others and speak intelligently about it because they know what they're talking about. And I think I see that a lot, is that we're just saying this, the Sunday extravaganza is here, but nobody knows what it is. You don't ever say the word that this is a free water testing event, or this is a well demonstration, or whatever it is that you're doing. We have to add those details. And even though social media tends to be a shorter form, even Twitter is 280 characters instead of 140 characters today. So make sure you're adding those details, because it's really going to be of use to your audience. All right, let's talk about the future. This was really the context for this whole presentation, that now that we've developed these new skills, we have new expectations, new skill sets of our audience as well. What is the role of virtual online training? What is the role of remote learning in the future of our programs? And I'm sure the answer is going to be different for everyone, but it's, what are the questions that we're asking about this? So number one, what's the right balance of in-person and virtual for our audience, for our program, for our organization? What would work best based on our, geographic constraints, our broadband constraints? There's so many different issues that may be at play that will influence, do we want to go back to more of the way it was because we had too many problems? Or were there things that worked really well and then we were able to reach new audiences with virtual programming, and we need to do more of that? We need to make that more part of our suite of programming. Also, what was most surprising about your efforts? We all kind of went into this blind, even though we were doing predominantly virtual programming from the start. That's part of what we do. When we saw such a huge uptick in interest in the things that we were doing, both as part of the private well class and wateroperator.org, we had to pivot some things, and we had to better understand, okay, what are the expectations that everyone has? What are the new questions that we're going to be answering? Such as, no, you can't receive a certificate for watching a video that we posted on YouTube. We've had to communicate that a lot more, because there's just a lot more desire for getting renewal CEUs from watching remote training. So thinking back to this experience, what was the most surprising? And then what can you do with that information to inform your program going forward? And then finally, how do we best leverage these new online skills? You may still be having remote meetings with your colleagues, particularly if some people are still working at home. I'm here at home right now. We're all going into this, whatever this new normal is right now. It might actually be our normal for a while. Things have shifted, and some things may never go back to the way they were. So in terms of collaboration, developing new ideas, putting together these programs, collaborating with, your regional local audiences, maybe others who share similar interests in public health and in drinking water and community safety, all the different players who may have a stake in the game with you. We're all going to be working towards what is the role of online communication in that. And so that's just something important to think about. So here's a few final reminders. So number one, technology and the internet will continue to play an important and changing role in how we learn and communicate. This was happening before, and it's going to continue to happen going forward, and probably even at a more accelerated pace. So the more that we can be prepared for more of these pivots, we're experts at pivots now, but how can we use that as a strength to be more resilient in the future in our programming? And of course, there's going to be even more approaches, technologies, things that we can't even imagine right now into making virtual interactions like we have with this conference feel more like in-person experiences. So, one small thing that we do is ask our presenters that if you're doing a recording, can you please put your face on the screen so it's not just a slide with a looming voice on there. And, with all the technology, with virtual reality and the things that AI can do, there's so many things that are going to be changing in the future. The metaverse, whatever that is, I don't even totally understand. And I deal with this stuff every day. So the way we interact online is going to continue to evolve and shift, and it's going to get more real, and it's going to still be a part of what we do. And we're going to have to be kind of ready for that. And I think there's always this bell curve of, early adopters, everyone in the middle, and then late adopters. And we've always chosen to be on the side of the early adopters so that we're there when the audience catches up to us. And so if that's something that you can do, I think it's really important to think about. And then finally, to also recognize that all of this, we're in a transition phase. Today's kids are only going to know this connected world, but we still have huge issues with internet access and speed in this country that still need solving, particularly in rural areas. And we are just in the middle of figuring it out. And so with that doesn't mean that there's not going to be in-person programming even well into the future. We just have to recognize that we're kind of in this awkward phase of growth as we are moving out of the pandemic and into what comes next. All right, I am here in the chat. Hopefully I've been answering your questions live because this is a recording, but if you have any additional questions, I am so excited to answer them for you. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm happy to kind of delve into some of the topics we weren't able to hit on as much, but I'm looking forward to sharing more with you and offering any insights I can on improving and optimizing your virtual programs. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. So, okay. Looks like Frida has a question. Thanks for the kind words about Tap Talk, Frida. We really enjoyed doing those. I didn't think I'd like podcasts as much as I do, but it's really interesting to talk to folks and learn more about them for sure. So I'm curious if there are new audiences, partners, people have been able to engage through webinars and online training. In Minnesota, we've been able to launch a virtual continuing education credit for in-home childcare providers that has a training component. Training component about private wells. We are working on an online continuing education credit for real estate professionals about private wells at property transfer. There's a lot more we could do. Curious to hear what others are doing, thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you gave the example of healthcare professionals. That's definitely something that we've had a lot of interest in, and we know that they're very short on time. And so using virtual training is probably going to be one of the best ways to do that. I'm definitely interested in other perspectives too. We've long done, real estate, professional webinars. We've definitely seen, even talking to those individuals here in our community, how needed that training is, because they are selling homes with wells and they don't know how to speak intelligently about them to inform the homeowners. So that's something that we'll continue to do. The childcare providers, I think, is particularly important, and we see a lot of that also in on the water operator side with dealing with lead issues.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Okay. And Ginger Davis, can you talk more about format of asking questions ahead of presentations?
Yeah. So the way we do it is we use GoToWebinar as our webinar provider, but this would work with probably most providers that have a registration form. And then most of them will let you set the confirmation URL to whatever you want. It can go back to your website. They have, of course, a standard confirmation URL that they use, but we send people directly to a Google Doc form so that they can enter in the questions. So they're immediately sent to, do you have any questions about this particular topic? And we find that we get tons of questions. Of course, we get lots of entries saying, no questions, thank you. But I feel like this is the number one way that we were able to get so many questions is sending them directly because there's no additional action or paying attention needed. Yes, you could email them, but you're going to get a much smaller response. So if you can do that automatic redirect, that's our favorite way to do it. And you can obviously send them to whatever form works best for you. But having it directly as that confirmation URL from your webinar registration system is the way to go.
And, we've been averaging close to 200 people actually attending our webinars and over 400 probably registering. So some months we might get 130 questions and some months only 60, but it's still, then we spend the time in advance and probably try to answer like at least 10 of those questions and put them in the slide deck so that they're actually part of the presentation. And then we also monitor the chat during the webinar. And if there are additional questions that come up, we stick those in a Google Doc that we can share on screen at the end. And so I think that's why it's becoming more successful, is because of all the questions we do answer. And when you think about it, if you work with private well owners very long, they don't call you when everything's going okay, right? They call you whenever they have a problem. And so answering their questions is typically what we end up doing anyway.
I would also say that if you are delivering local programming, asking those questions helps you tailor the presentation, because you never know when one group send it to other people in their network and all of a sudden you have a room full of realtors or you have a room full of healthcare professionals. And so by asking those questions, you can kind of take the temperature of your audience and maybe shift the presentation a little bit to better address their needs.
So there's more in the chat. Ginger had said renters is another group to target, and certainly, and someone else mentioned that in general it's complicated because who owns the well and who's paying for the items kind of thing. In most states, it should be the owner is responsible. I know we had Mark Johnson from RCAP Solutions on one of our podcasts talking about renters' rights in Vermont, where they have actual law there that's supposed to be followed. Most states don't. But like in Illinois, I reached out. My son actually moved to a house in the country that he was renting, and it had an old dug well. And so I went to the county health department, and they said they would back up. If we get an analysis and it showed bacteria, they would make sure the owner fixed it because it makes the home unlivable. And that was my own county. It doesn't mean it'd be that way in another county, but it's that sort of thing. There's another comment here, and I'll just put it up. So it says in Rhode Island, our water sampler license requires technical sampling course, which became logistically impossible during COVID. So we worked with RCAP to create an online seminar. So there's a lot of people interested. And I think I mentioned, maybe it was just in our small group at the on Wednesday morning, but the problem with realtors, I was talking to Gary Hicks about this. The problem with realtors is all their CEUs are based at the state level. And so you have to get credit. You have to get approval in every state if you're going to have folks on from realtors from other states. And so the real way for us, since most of our webinars are meant to be national in scope, that's beyond our capability, is to go seek out CEUs from all 50 state realtor associations. And so the few that have reached out to us and offered that, we've done presentations for them that are worth CEs for realtors. But that's also the other secret, in my opinion, of getting folks involved, is if they have a professional license and you can make it worth CE credit and you offer a free webinar, it's a chance for them to get continuing education without paying any fees. And that's an advantage for them and for us because it gets their ear and allows us to spend some time with them.
I wanted to add one more thing related to that, that in hosting a training and marketing it as directed towards a specific audience is really helpful, because even though you may be teaching similar content, of course there's going to be variations. When someone sees, oh, this is for me, they're more likely to buy in than saying, oh, this general topic, it's for all these different types of people. They're less likely to attend that way. So I think we've really seen success by targeting those specifically for those audiences.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. I didn't realize we were running late, so I'm going to move us forward.